Show of hands, please. Who here thinks rights are important? Yeah, I know what you're thinking. That was a really stupid question. Because, who doesn't think rights are important? I mean, in a couple of days, it's the 238th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. We've been learning since grade school how important rights are. We hear that some rights are so important they are inalienable, like the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that's a dumb question. Well, here's another dumb question. Who has those rights? Who gets to exercise the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Duh, people. Well, 238 years ago, it was white male property owners. But we have progressed a little since then to the point where now we can say people have those rights. Are people with disabilities people? Not as dumb a question as you would think. Because it wasn't until 1990 with the Americans with Disabilities Act that Congress got around to saying that people with disabilities had the same rights as everyone else. It wasn't until 1999 that the U.S. Supreme Court, in a case called Olmstead, got around to saying that people with disabilities had the right to live and work and have their lives in the community instead of in institutional isolation. And yet I am here to tell you today that people with disabilities' lives are beset by stupid questions. They are surrounded by stupid questions like this one. Are your rights worth anything if you can't exercise them? Because for 2,000 years, from ancient Rome until today, people with disabilities have been kept separate from society and had their rights taken away by guardianship. Guardianship is a legal process where a court decides that you shouldn't have the right to make certain decisions and gives those rights to someone else. That person, for all intents and purposes, becomes you. Makes decisions for you, makes life choices instead of you, making you what one law professor I know calls an unperson. So are those questions really all that stupid? Are rights worth anything if you can't exercise them? If the life that you live is what someone else lets you live? If the liberty you exercise is what someone else gives you? If the happiness you pursue ain't yours? Are your rights worth anything? Because the vast majority of guardianships are what we call full or plenary guardianship, where every single right from where you live to whether you work to whether you even get health care is made by someone else. And I tell you, for 2,000 years, these have been made with the best of intentions. People have always said that people with disabilities need to be protected, need to have protection from the risks in society and the trouble they can get into, and everything is done with their best interests in mind. Quick, show of hands here. How many people here have heard the phrase, relax, it's for your own good, and been terrified? And yet, people with disabilities keep getting pushed into guardianship. Can anyone tell me now, as we sit here today, 24 years after the Americans with Disabilities Act, 15 years after the Olmstead decision, after a congressman said that the average ward has less rights than your average felon, in this age of miracles and wonders, of iPads and cloud computing and Medicaid waivers and more supports and services than ever before, can anyone here answer this stupid question? Why has the number of people under guardianship tripled in the last 20 years? And the answer, I'm afraid, is the same as it ever has been. Because people with disabilities need guardianship. They need protection. They need to be kept safe. They need to be kept safe from themselves, because otherwise they might make a bad decision. They might sign something they shouldn't sign, or meet someone they shouldn't meet, or buy something they shouldn't buy. Show of hands. Who here is closed on a mortgage? Did you read everything you signed? Or did you just sign what the broker told you to sign? Bad decision. Where's your guardian? Who here has consented to a medical procedure like surgery? Did you read all those papers they put in front of you, or did you just listen to your doctor or your nurse and sign what they told you to sign? Bad decision. Where's your guardian? Who here has bought a pasta maker at 2 in the morning? Bad decision. But more importantly, who here has made a bad decision and learned from it? Who here has made a mistake and gotten themselves up a better, stronger, smarter person? Tell me, why are we taking that opportunity away from people with disabilities? Why do we say to them, you don't get the chance to live and learn, to fall and rise up again? Instead, what happens to people with disabilities, they get pushed into guardianship by people from the outside. Parents are told by teachers, when your child turns 18, you better become the guardian if you want to have any involvement in their education. By doctors, you better get guardianship if you want to have any involvement in your child's medical history. From lawyers, you better become the guardian, or otherwise you're not going to have any rights with regard to your child. Over and over and over again, all with the best of intentions, and all in the face of study after study that says people with disabilities who have more independence, who have more self-determination or control over their lives, have better lives. They have better jobs, more community integration, they're healthier, they live longer, and they are better able to recognize and avoid abuse. So as I have told to a judge on more than one occasion, if you want to keep this person safe, don't put him or her under a guardianship. Don't take away rights, empower rights. Find an alternative, something that recognizes that every person has those Jeffersonian rights of life, liberty, and happiness. Every person has the right to make decisions, and every person needs a little bit of help. And that alternative is what's called supported decision-making. Now, supported decision-making is not some new ideal. It's not some new hippy-trippy thing or the latest fad. It's what that law professor friend of mine says is a fancy way of saying what you and I do every day. But because we always need to put labels on jars and define our terms, here we go. Supported decision-making is giving people with disabilities the information and help they need and want so they can understand the situations they face and choices they must make so they can make their own decision without the need for guardianship. Or as I call it, making decisions. Because it's the same thing that you and I do, right? When you have to make a decision, what do? You do some research, you talk to some people, you get some information from friends, and you make the best choice you can. That is supported decision-making. If you have ever said to any person, explain it to me like I'm a 4-year-old, you have engaged in supported decision-making. So when I go to the doctor, and the doctor says, Mr. Martinis, you've got a cervical radiculopathy, which we can treat conservatively with the Rice method and a regimen of anti-inflammatories, or we can treat aggressively through a spinal fusion. And I say, huh? And the doctor goes, you got an owie in your neck, you can rest, you can take Motrin, or we can cut you open and see what's going on. And I go, I got it now. Thank you, now I can make my decision. Or when I go to the auto mechanic, and the auto mechanic says, you got some problems with your muffler bearings and your headlight fluid's a pint low. And I go to a friend of mine who knows about cars, and I say, can you help me? And he goes, yeah, there ain't no such thing as headlight fluid. You're getting ripped off. And I say, thank you, now I can make a better decision and get a better mechanic. I have engaged in supported decision-making, and people with disabilities can do the exact same thing. Each one of us makes decisions in different ways, but I think all of us uses the same essential method of gathering the resources we need and the information that is required to make the best possible decision, and opportunities for that are everywhere. Who here's been to an IEP meeting? Okay, the latest, greatest thing in IEPs is the student-led IEP, right? Student sits at the head of the table surrounded by the parents, the teachers, the providers, and they all work together to help the student understand what his or her unique skills and abilities and needs and interests are so the student can chart his path. That's supported decision-making. Who here has ever done any Medicaid or medical planning? Latest, greatest thing, person-centered planning. Person sits with a case manager and providers, and they all work together so the person can say, these are the supports and services I want to live in the community and have the best possible life that I want. That is supported decision-making, and yet we waste these opportunities time after time. People with disabilities have decisions made for them instead of with them. Decisions are made on their behalf instead of by them. Well, folks, today, here, 24 years after the ADA, it's time to say no more stupid questions, isn't it? It's time to say there are rights that we all think are important, that we have all been saying are important for years and years and years, and to say that people with disabilities, once and for all, are people with the same rights to exercise those same choices as everyone else. Because I tell you this, every right that you think is important is encompassed in supported decision-making. Every single one. How can you have community integration if there is a guardian who can say you may not live in the community? How can you have employment first policies and employment opportunities if there is someone saying, no, I don't want you to work. In fact, I want you in a sheltered workshop. How can you have the same basic rights to the same basic things in the community to meet people and do things, the same simple pleasures you and I have if there's someone who can say, you're going to live in a group home and you're only going to go out on outings when they are okay with it? No more. No more, because if we commit to an alternative way, if we commit to implementing supported decision-making across the lifespan, not just in guardianship, but in education, in medical, in vocational, in every place where a decision can be needed, we can finally get to the place where people with disabilities actually have the same rights and opportunities as everyone else. And when that happens, when that day comes, we can finally stop talking about people with disabilities' rights. And we can start talking about their choices. What do I want to do today? Where do I want to work? Where do I want to live? Who do I want to be with? How do I want to order my life from this day forward? And I promise, those won't be stupid questions. Thank you.